So I'm Mike Lenz. I'm an associate professor of urban planning and public policy at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs. I do all my research and most of my teaching along in the area of housing and segregation. And so I am certainly very passionate about the needs for better housing opportunities for everybody, but especially for people of color and Black people specifically.
Yes, I'm super excited. As you guys can tell, we have an amazingly esteemed panel. And with that, I really want to jump into today's conversation. Also, to make sure that we have time for everyone at the end for Q&A. So now that we went through introductions, I now want to pass it off to you, Mike. Could you please help give us a history on Black home ownership here in the States, as well as discuss some of the previous laws or policies that have stunted Black home ownership?
Yes, thank you for that lead in there, and thank you, if I haven't said so already, for just inviting me and having me be part of this conversation. So I don't want to take up too much time. There's certainly a long history lesson on racial discrimination in housing that one could give on something like this. And a policy context that coupled with that long history has certainly a lot of ramifications for why Black home ownership rates are significantly lower, and Black home ownership opportunities often feel so out of reach, and outcomes are often worse if we think about some of the things that can go wrong with foreclosure and things of that nature. But just to give a little bit of context, really the modern mortgage system in the U.S. didn't really exist until the federal government stepped in and kind of created the conditions to make it possible in the 30s as a result of the Great Depression, and that really starts kind of at least two sets of experiences. One for white prospective homeowners and renters, and Black prospective homeowners and renters. And so that really starts off in the mortgage industry, where now we have this ability for people to get credit and buy homes, but that is in many ways constrained for Black Americans for decades. Some of the ways that this occurred was, through, things that I think a lot of people know about in terms of redlining, where people of color, potential borrowers of color, and neighborhoods that were racially integrated were seen as risky as far as mortgage lenders, and that was, with the imprimatur of the federal government. That was fine, and even the common practice as told by the government that that we should deem Black people and Black neighborhoods as risky investments, and therefore it is much more expensive to buy credit, to get credit there. We also, of course, have lots of violence and discrimination when people of color were attempting to buy housing in neighborhoods that were not all Black. And then we had real estate agents that would steer Black Americans away from white neighborhoods. We also had racial covenants. So racial covenants in as part of the deed of a house. You can find these covenants in a lot of deeds still around today that might say you are not allowed to sell this property to a Black person or to somebody who's not of the white race or something like that. So we had all these mechanisms, right, that made it much harder for Blacks to buy housing and to get a foothold. If we especially think about kind of the post-war period in the late 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, where you have this period where where housing was plentiful and cheap, and it was very easy to build wealth by purchasing housing over the subsequent decades. And so through these mechanisms, we're at a point right now where blacks are far behind, right? Whites in terms of the equity and the wealth that we have built over the years, right? And so, there is a bunch of catching up that we have to do from this previous time period in which we were not able to kind of share in the spoils of
also
homeownership.
She did not.
Please go on mute.
Cool. All right. So, but fast forward to today, and skipping a lot of the mechanisms here, is we have Black spaces and that are devalued, right? So I would highlight Andre Perry's research from the Brookings Institution that talks about the devaluation of Black property and space, right? And so even for many of us who have been successful in buying homes, particularly in majority Black neighborhoods and spaces, we might not be building the kind of equity that we would have built if we were in a white space, because because those spaces are viewed financially in different ways. So, we have kind of household wealth gaps that bring us big challenges in terms of gaining a foothold. We have continued discrimination in housing markets, certainly, where, real estate agents might steer you to particular places still in 2021. We still might have, there's still plenty of evidence of racial discrimination in mortgage lending. That still occurs, no matter how we do it, even if we do it with algorithms, and if we do it without people seeing each other's race, like somehow, some way, we still find ways to discriminate in these ways. And then, again, we have to contend with the issues of the devaluation of Black space, which I think, gives us some challenges at the present. And, policy-wise, the last thing I'll say is, we came out of the Great Recession, in the 2011 and 12 period, and you see that that so many neighborhoods that were not were majority white or Asian rebounded much faster than neighborhoods that are that have higher concentrations of Latino, Hispanic, or Black households. So even with kind of the losses of the Great Recession were greater often for African Americans, and then the rebound has been less kind often to those homeowners. So that's kind of some of the context as I see it, going back a few decades. And I look forward to thinking about how we get through some of these issues.
No, that was amazing context. I think even just as a homeowner, hearing things about the devaluing of homes, the household gaps, continued discrimination, and what that even looks like, not just during the times of the Great Recession, but now in the wake of COVID, with losses being greater in communities of color, and those continuing to be great. I now want to pass the question over to you, Ashley. So given everything that Michael just mentioned, why is it important that we talk about these challenges around Black home ownership and address them
now? Yes. So
you're on mute, Ashley.
Sorry. It's very important to have these conversations because, one, let's just take it back, how he gave you guys a little history. So in 1960, discrimination was a legal government policy, right? The Black homeownership rate was at 42% then. Let's take it to 2019. The Black homeownership rate was 41% in California. That's a 59-year gap. Now, my dad's only 60, so that's not that long ago. Now, there's more to the story. So in 2004, 51% of Blacks were homeowners in California, right? But after the recession, the Great Recession of 2008, we never bounced back. This did affect other communities as well. For example, the Latinx community, they dropped 7%. The white community dropped 7%. The Asian Pacific Islander community dropped 2%. The Black community dropped 10%. And it was already the lowest at the time with a rate of 51% in 2004 compared to 56% of Latinx homeowners, 75% white homeowners, and 67% Asian and Pacific Islander homeowners. So when I looked at this, I immediately seen that something needed to be done. And this is why, CalHFA has launched their Building Black Wealth campaign, which we will address these inequities through outreach and education. We are stepping up our partnerships with ethnic media, faith organizations, and other trusted advisors that can really reach our community and connect them with resources such as homeownership education, counseling, and down payment assistance. We also have our Did You Know video series, which will explain our country's history of discrimination, along with our mini series, which is called, I love, honestly, it's only a 2-minute video, Tips to Black Homeownership, which is geared towards helping first-time homebuyers navigate through the home buying process. I think a lot has to do with the lack of knowledge and not being taught finances and literally just having your hand held through the process. It's going to be daunting because you've never experienced it, and our community hasn't really opened those doors to have those conversations. So this is very important. And if we don't address this now, it's just going to get worse for our future generations.
Yes, I completely agree. And also major shout out to all the work that your organization is doing. Later on in the presentation, we'll have a link so everyone can get those resources that Ashley spoke about to help supporting you. I know many of you are thinking about purchasing your first home. And as Ashley mentioned, it's a daunting process. So the more resources, the better. Lori, I'm now going to pass it off to you. You're also in housing in LA. And can you talk about why is Black home ownership important, but maybe from the perspective around generational wealth?
We got context. Thank you, Mitchella. And we got action, a call to action. And I think then there's the basics of are you ready, right? And what we find is simple stuff. It's credit, savings, income. You need those three to be able to qualify for a mortgage. And there's all kinds of weird rules that if you don't know how to play the game, you're in a game. So what NHS does, we've touched over 25,000 units of housing, lending, building it, fixing it, selling it, lots of time. And what we figured out was that people, when they learn how to navigate, it's a roadmap. And then they have more success. So like many groups that are HUD approved housing counselors, we teach financial education. We make affordable loans as a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution. And then we're touching properties all the time on the redevelopment side. And I will say to you, there's no magic. There's do the work. And so we encourage people to get in there. So go back to the last foreclosure crisis. We lost 10, 12%. People fight over the numbers. No reason to. Whatever the numbers were that Black people lost, it was bad. All right. And in LA County, we also were lent to on a bad basis. If you track Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data, Black people are at the bottom. We're not making it as far as some others. And so it's how do we improve ourselves, right? And so the Fed came out with a study in like 2016 that said we were earning 1%, we were 1% of the net worth of white people. So people wanted to fight about that study and say it wasn't right. And I said, okay, so fight about it. Let's make it 10%. It's laughable, right? We've got to do a better job. We need to understand what money means and stop putting it on our backs and put it in investments. And if homeownership is the investment you seek to choose, then get in here and get on this path, is what we tell people. We don't mince around about it. And what I'd say to you is simple. That last foreclosure crisis, we lost a lot of folks because people borrowed wrong. And banks were happy to lend to them wrong. And Black realtors, like every other color of realtors, were happy to sell to them wrong. Too much house for what they could afford. So as we looked at our numbers at NHS going from 45% Black families over 30 plus years of business to less than 25%. And it stayed there. So I said, well, who's missing? Oh, the Black millennial, the buppy. So when we ran after people and said, hey, what's going on with you? You're not buying right now. The responses we got were all the wrong answer. So in the last 3 years, we've been in people's faces. And I'm telling them, stop the bling. Stop being full of yourself. Why do you need to live in Santa Monica or, Westwood, unless you're a student? What are you doing? Why would you spend $3,000 a month on rent when you could put it toward a mortgage? And I mean, we're aggressive. And we've talked, young Black engineers, what are you doing? Why don't you own? Why don't you want to live in Madeir's house in Crenshaw? And if you're not going to live there, at least keep it in the family portfolio and rent it out. But don't sell the house. Are you crazy? And so that aggression paid off. And we're now at 44%, and it'll be 46% by the end of the month, Black business. I'm so ecstatic because people heard the message and they get it that whether it's real estate or stocks and bonds or some other form of investment, make sure you're going deep and not just wide. Make sure you have things that can last and that are sustainable. And geography matters. I'll stay there for a second. We're in real estate, so it's always about location. I get it that some neighborhoods aren't as exciting as some others, but get started. Buy a condo, do what you can do. Get yourself pre-qualified, go to class, figure out that credit savings income thing. And the reason it's important for generational wealth building is we're busy building bling and not portfolios. We're not building what matters. And East Coast just does better than us. Black people on the East Coast, I love them most days. South, there's a richness there that we don't have on the West Coast, and we need to stop it and get serious. And so I think the buyer education component is huge, and we have to be unafraid to see what our numbers look like. And when you do that, then at least you can plan, right? And you want to work with Ashley and Michael and others who are in the cut and loving on the notion of being able to build wealth for your family. It's not all about you. I'm going to say that again. It's not all about you. It's about the future generations that survive and thrive because you made wise decisions today. How many times do you have to go out to eat? Stop it. Stop doing the takeout during the pandemic. Cook. These are basic, raw, Madeir type concepts that matter, right? And I'm using language that's old school because we need it. And so I would just say to you that I want to do a quick shout out, Mitchella, if I can, to UCLA Center for Neighborhood Knowledge and Dr. Ong and Chan and some of the others over there. We're getting ready to help each other by putting together a homeowner vulnerability, too big a word for me, index. And Dr. Ong and his team, they did all the work, but we just dumped data in, right? Tracking Black people. We dumped data in, tracking people of color. We dumped data in saying, even if the Fed was wrong, we want that number to be 70%, not 1% of net worth. How do we get about being about that business? So our solution, the Legacy Project. And we have been touching on it for the last 3 to 5 years, but now we're going to boom it. And we're unpacking starting tonight to encourage people to focus on legacy. I'll interview Dr. Perry, Michael, on Friday, and then we're going to share our little fun interview with the world. He's hanging out with NHS and Black community developers all across the country to talk about wealth building. And Black people, get in here and do what's right and stop it. Let's all learn together and build the money over time. No one can take that from you. You learn the system, you work the system, you stop the racism, let it stop because you know more. And so I just want to encourage people with that. There's more to say, but I think, Mitchella, we focus on this wealth element because we can align our interests to the things that matter. And sometimes we just need a guide, and we're here to help. So thank you.
Yes, Lori, you gave a lot of quotable quotes there. We got to stop talking about it and put investing on our backs. Like, you young millennials, why aren't you buying homes? And think all of those things are definitely appropriate. And so I want to take it a step back because Lori, Ashley, and Michael, you were talking about different statistics, you know, around today's and how we're getting the numbers up specifically within the Los Angeles area. Could we maybe take a step back and then talk about some of the residual impacts or long-term consequences of redlining? Michael, since you kicked this off, I'm going to start with you, and then maybe we have all three of you answer this question.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think, you know, what stands out is, you know, the extent to which you can look at redlining maps, of course, from the past, and they very much track some of the types of outcomes that you might expect to see today, right? Where a redline neighborhood in 1940 is still a very racially segregated and disadvantaged place more often than not. And that's, you know, and that just, I think that just really speaks to how these legacies, you know, to borrow Lori's word with maybe a little bit of a different outcome, you know, these legacies do have real impact in the present. And so, you know, that doesn't, but, you know, I guess it is also important to emphasize that, like, we're not fully captive to that history, right? We can't, you know, we do still have to make our way out of that. And it's not that history becomes destiny necessarily. And
I echo that, Michael. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no,
I 100% like keep going.
That's how I'm going to finish it. So I'll kick it to Ashley then.
A lot of these neighborhoods were left underdeveloped from redlining and decaying. They weren't able to receive loans to purchase or renovate their homes. Because of this and where they're located, they had limited access to banking, healthcare, retail, groceries. How are these people going to get to their groceries? It played a big role in reducing the homeownership rates and the homeownership values, the housing values, I mean. Redfin literally just did a study and showed that the average homeowner in a redline neighborhood has earned 89% less equity, or $524,000 less than their counterpart in a green line neighborhood since 1980. So when we unpack that and break it down further, we see that the median home value in 2019 for a hazardous area stood at $587,000, compared to $1.1 million in a community with the best rating. This is literally exactly why we should be talking about this, because look at the effects. This started in the 30s. We are now in 2021.
I hear a lot of people going, in the background, Ashley. I'm excited about those statistics, I think the depth of the problem, I think you breaking that down is something that I'm continuing to learn about as you speak. Lori, did you want to close us out on this question?
Sure. So there's all kinds of redlining. We talked about it relative to housing. And then you have to think about insurance and how many property casualty companies, I'm gonna blast them, basically refused to insure properties in neighborhoods that were considered tough. So they redlined and didn't greenline, and then property values plummeted more. You think about appraisals, and there's been all kinds of studies in the last 2 years in particular that highlight an awful truth we know about if a Black or brown or person of color neighborhood is devalued through the appraiser. People started maneuvering to try to make sure appraisers didn't know they were Black so that they could get a higher value placed on the home because they wanted to resell it or take out a home equity loan or whatever they were planning to do with their property. And so all these things matter over time. And part of why we talk the way we do on Black stations like KJLH is to say, don't sell your house. Hold on to it. What are you doing? Does your family have the will to stay in whatever framework you stay, but to keep that property in your family? And as we talk to people, generally it's taxes and insurance that blows them out. if mama dies and leaves the house, then the kids don't have the wherewithal to take over the mortgage or to refinance it and pay off everybody else and the one who wants to keep it. All that is normal financial transactions. But the other side of redlining is that we didn't get to build wealth to do any of that. And if other people groups were able to start out with an advantage and have access, then the challenge you run into is without accessibility, affordability, availability, we're not able to get in there and build our wealth over time. So all I'm saying is we want to pay attention to what we've got. We want to try to get more. So it's promotion and preservation. And part of what the Legacy Project is going to spend time talking about, not just access, but once you have property in your view, then how do you need to live to keep it? What are the kinds of investments you need to be taking? Mitchella, I just learned 4 months ago that there's a group called the Black Estate Planning Professionals. No, that wouldn't have never come up for me, but you better know we've aligned with them. And we're going to talk during a pandemic, right? About what does your estate look like? Because somebody's may die, right? With a pandemic in your family. What does that do? What's the ripple effect? Can you protect the pieces and morsels that you have? And so I think it's redlining cuts through all that, but it's about being aware again. And you've gotten good information tonight. Someone put in the chat about reading The Color of Law. There's lots of books out there similar to that talk about segregation, redlining, and all that. But you don't want that to overwhelm you. You want to get started on your path of achievement.
No, that's perfect. And now that all three of you spoke and we understand the gravity of the situation and the challenges that us millennials and other age groups are facing, I want to talk about some of the resources available to overcome these challenges. I know many of my classmates, when they heard that I was doing this panel, reached out to me because they're interested in purchasing houses. And as Michael said, we can't stay here. We got to keep going. So what are these resources available to help us create legacies of Black home ownership? Laura, you can keep going.
Oh, thanks. So clearly NHS is not the only one of its kind. You know, I'm very big on sharing and making sure you just tap into whatever resources might work for you. So if you look at HUD.gov, G-O-V, that's where you can find lots of all kinds of resource information. But certainly the local housing counseling agency you may want to team up with to get on this path to homeownership. If you're already a homeowner on the call and you know you might be facing some challenges or delinquencies, you can use that website to find a counseling agency. And now we don't say near you anymore because everything's virtual. But we're online 6 workshops a week right now. And the phones have been blowing off the hook. Most of it is around purchase, Mitchella. And I'm very, very excited about that, even though it's a little scary because we don't have a lot of inventory. But people are getting ready to buy. Students getting ready to buy. Figure out the student loan trash. Don't decide that you're out of the game because of it. Figure out what you need to do to flip it and engage. And so going to class matters, so make that investment. The other thing and these are housing counselors all throughout the state. The other thing I'd say is you want to figure out if there's any special programming based on your income that helps you with down payment assistance. Last year, we closed on 529 loans because Wells Fargo made some funding available and we executed it on their behalf. And there were all kinds of students in there. The Black folks were at the lead of the group. So that's why I don't want to hear about what we cannot achieve. But people bought on the rim of LA County, they bought condos so they could participate in the program. Crazy. So there's special programming. You can find those on the websites of some of these housing agencies I'm mentioning. And then it's what do you need to do to adapt? Get yourself pre-qualified at some point. Gold class first, maybe, whatever. But get that pre-qualification so you know what you look like today. And then what the counselors do is help you figure out one-to-one your special financial situation. And there's going to be all kinds of different resources coming through the federal, state, local governments. You've got banks who have their own private programs. I'm just working with a bank today that's granting $25,000 to people who go through their bank up to 150% of the area median income. City of LA puts out money to the middle class every year too. So you don't want to lose sight of sometimes there's special programming. If you fit none of it, then you want to look at products as well. Okay. and think about what product may work for you. Maybe it's 3% down. That's what you could save. And then you finance 97%. But in the end, all of it is back into what's comfortable for you so you don't lose it. You may need to buy with some friends. We sold last year to two brothers. They just came home from college and bought from NHS. God help us. I loved it. And these boys, they lived with their parents for a year, and then they got in class, and then they bought together. So figure it out. Everyone's situation is different, but don't be afraid of it. Lean in.
Yes. Ashley.
I love that. Group economics I fight for all the time. You can build wealth faster with a team, not just by yourself. CalHFA is a resource itself. We provide down payment and closing cost assistance for first-time home buyers. Just a little background, a first-time home buyer means you haven't owned a home in the past 3 years. So if you owned before and you've rented for 3 years, you are now a first-time home buyer. So that is a resource. You can check us out on our website. It's actually in the link in the chat box below. We also, in 2020, CalHFA launched the National Mortgage Settlement Counseling Program, which we allocated $50 million to the underserved communities for free credit, pre-purchase, mortgage, finances, counseling, free counseling from HUD certified counselors up to $1,500 per household. That is statewide. So please go take advantage of these services. They will help you reach your goals to home ownership. I like to say, put it in these terms, even if you went to go get a loan and you were denied, I want you guys to know that is not a forever no. That is just for right now. And if that happens to you, you go ahead and go to a HUD certified counselor so they can get you back there in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months to get that approved. So that's another resource as well. You can go to consumerfinance.gov. They have info on there, and then go to the HUD website and you can find a HUD certified counselor that way as well.
I hope everyone is here taking notes and that you remember that this is being recorded. And so that way you can reference this later to support people with buying their homes. Okay, so then transitioning to the last question, we'll have Q&A open at 7:45. So that means we have about 5 minutes left. And I know you all have pretty much touched on this, but the last question we wanted were, what are some ways you recommend that we could expand Black home ownership? And Michael, I'll pass this one off to you first.
Can I just say like reparations and I just walk away? Is that good? Okay, because I mean, or at least like some baby bonds if you want to, if you want to more of like a wonky policy idea on it. I mean, I think so. I mean, joking aside, I mean, I think that with some different political realities, I think wealth transfers of some kind would certainly be in order given the very brief version of the history that we've talked about on this call. But that aside, what I wonder about, maybe this is just like my pandemic brain right now, is how, and I think Lori and Ashley would be more qualified to speak to this in some ways, is like, how are we thinking about geography differently now that we only do panels on Zoom and we do a lot of other things remotely in ways that we didn't before. And, that's not a permanent condition for everybody's job, but it's a, more permanent condition for some people, right? Where we are now maybe less tethered to particular locations for work. And so like, does that broaden the horizons of where people can actually get a foothold into homeownership in terms of where they would look geographically speaking? And I mean, otherwise, I think like we do need more serious policy work from the federal government to help subsidize and support first-time home buyers, and with a particular attention to racial equity in better ways than we've done through CRA and FHA programs of the past. But that's all I have to offer on that.
I don't know if I would say that's all. That was a lot of gold.
Oh, sorry. Okay, well, good.
Ashley or Lori, before we hop into the Q&A, anything that you'd like to add to that?
Well, clearly from a real estate standpoint, we know there's got to be policy reform. And it costs too much to build right now. In the city of LA, if you called the housing department tomorrow, it's about $550,000 to $600,000 a door to build for families who are earning at 60% of the area median income or below an apartment. Now I can build homeownership, stone, just put slab down and get new construction for $350,000, $400,000 if the land is overpriced. Something's wrong with that picture. And so all the fees and the constraints on building, everything from environmental law to just land use, right? The complexities of building. It's not okay. And you got luxury stuff. Now I live in Ladera Heights. So y'all, I'm not supposed to tell my stuff on air, I guess, whatever. I'm the poorest person in the neighborhood, Michael. Happy to be there. And I'll tell you what, down the street at La Cienega and Jefferson, they're putting up 1,200 housing units or whatever the number is. It's a mess. Luxury. How much more luxury can we build? Right? Because the everyday person can't do it and should not be ashamed they can. It's ridiculous pricing. And so they're building their own oasis. We got to stop that. All development should integrate with community. We need diverse income communities so that they strengthen and thrive. But families who are low income shouldn't have to be booted because Starbucks shows up in the neighborhood. Ridiculous. So it's how do we balance to that? I'm going to say to all of you tonight, you need to join. Join to advocate, join to speak up, join to make your voices heard, join to tell your stories of your Madirs and your grandpas and everybody else who may have achieved. People don't believe us and they think that we're always under because we chose to be under. We need to change that narrative. We need to support Black business. We need to be about saying out loud to each other, being Black matters and I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm standing up for something. And join in. We met with a lot of young people last year and buy back the block. Lots of ideas. Let's say, do you have any money? Let's go now. Come on. Ideas, concepts, good. Let's apply them. And so I think this whole narrative, you're doing it, Mitchella and the UCLA team. Thank you. And let's just keep telling the story and then garnering the resources. We're in a moment in time where we can pull at the resources that are there and place demands on banks who have redlined, insurance companies who have redlined, corporate folks who lie about diversity. Just stop it all. And as we join together and speak about it, and then say what we're willing to do to adapt to the right change, I think we'll have a lot more progress. And we won't have to look over our shoulder and be embarrassed about it.
Got it. Ashley, anything?
Well, I really don't have to say much because they touched on everything that needed to be heard. Policies. That's really big, though. I will say we really need lenders to continue to improve their outreach efforts to the Black communities and the resources that are available. It's just such a lack of that when it comes to our community. And I think it has a lot to do with their marketing and sending the wrong messages. They got to tailor the messages to our community. I've noticed being out in the field that a lot of our people listen to our people. So they need to see more of us out there giving this information and talking about these things. Another thing I feel that's really important is we could throw programs at people all day long. It's the importance of homeownership. Why are we doing this? I feel like that's kind of what we touched on in our Did You Know video series. It talks about the past. I want people to understand if it wasn't important, why did they lock you out so many times? Why did they fight to put these policies, these racially restricted covenants, redlining? Why was all this put in place to keep you out of it if it wasn't important for you to have? And I want to just leave you guys with that.
Okay, that was a great mic drop. I'm very proud of everyone. No, thank you panelists so much for this informative session. Like as a homeowner, I think this really showed me how far reaching the impacts of like discriminatory policies are, and the numbers that you mentioned and the resources that all three of you were putting together. Like I haven't heard anything like this before. And I think as you all stated, these conversations are needed within the Black community. And so for everyone who's still with us, as you can see, Ziman Center has posted a lot of things in the chat with like resources. So I see the link to CalHFA, which Ashley has spoken about, a link to the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation, Affordable House Clearing. So please go through these. We'll also be providing information after today's chat. We are now moving into the Q&A portion of the program. So if you have questions for the panelists, please use the Zoom to raise hand function, and then I'll call your name, and then you'll unmute your mic and ask your question. Also, you may type your questions into the chat, and I've actually been going through the chat and filtering in through some questions. But yes, please use Zoom etiquette and do not come off of mute just because you get excited. I know we have an amazing panel here today. But one of the first questions that I saw someone had asked a little bit earlier, and this question is from Mabi, and apologies, Mabi, if I did not pronounce that correctly, but any tips and suggestions for first-time Black home owners or buyers on how to stand out in an increasingly competitive market in order to improve one's odds in securing a particular property? Ashley, you're making a face.
Well, sometimes people want to know you can do it. Now, you got a lot of overbidding going on. It's the seller's market because there's low inventory, right? But you also, in standing out, may need to start in different neighborhoods than you originally thought about, and get in there and get, you know, the first home, and don't let it plan to be your last. But certainly our realtors are spending a bunch of time on the packaging side, so it's clear that the buyer can perform. They've got they're pre-approved. They've got all their financing lined up. They can close within 30 days, right? They don't have a bunch of weird stuff or blemishes on their credit. These are the things that make a distinguishing person, and then being willing to spend a little more than you might have thought about. But it's definitely the real estate and the location change that we've seen working for people. And we have people getting outbid and overbid all the time. But as we tweak the model and they're considering other communities that they hadn't thought about, that's been a very big deal as a game changer for some of the families we have.
That's a great point, Lori. And it's also, please do your due diligence and find a realtor that is educated. There are so many real estate professionals who know nothing. So it's up to you to interview 3 of them. You know what I mean? And you're going to see, you need someone to actually advocate for you, because to be real, what's going on right now in real estate is FHA versus conventional. So you can come in there with an FHA loan and they won't even look at your offer because it's an FHA loan, which FHA closes just like a conventional. But if your realtor doesn't understand that, they can't advocate for you properly. So the first step you need to do is make sure you find an educated real estate professional that can advocate for you when you are at that table. That's really step 1 for me when it comes to the home buying process.
I see a lot of head nodding. Next question, because you guys got a lot of questions coming in. People are very excited about this topic. From Steven, is there anything that can be done at the local level, something like zoning or ordinances to ensure and sustain Black home ownership?
Well, you know, I mean, I think Lori definitely touched on the cost of, you know, the cost of new housing in this market. And when I say market, I mean, really talking about Southern California. But, you know, it's definitely the case that we don't build enough housing for the amount of people that want to buy it or rent it. And that has very significant implications for how much it costs. It's not the only reason why it's expensive to be in Los Angeles, but it's definitely a reason. And so I do think that we need to find ways to expedite the production of new housing in more places around here. You know, even if a lot of that new housing is not going to be the stuff that's going to be like a first-time home buyer's house, because more housing does, you know, tend to lead to less expensive housing for the rest of us.
we're encouraging some things, Mitchella, like community real estate investment trusts, where we have community ownership. We have community land trusts that are back and popular again. Never thought I'd see that. Lease to purchase, some people were asking about that. Those models are tough because people tend to be dishonest. So if you're considering entering an agreement like that, make sure you have a trusted advisor, preferably a lawyer, who's looking at your documents. We're also pushing for land use and zoning changes, as you can imagine, to try to take it up just a little notch. We don't need to be New York tomorrow, no offense to them. But I think if people know that they can add a unit through accessory dwelling units, ADUs, if people know that they could convert an existing home to a threeplex. In South LA, we have lots of 2 to 4 units on lots already as detached homes. And people don't think about buying a duplex that's detached and then renting out the other unit. It's also looking at what's vacant, what's not being used in our city. The last numbers I saw, over 70,000 buildings were vacant in LA, and they weren't all toxic. So it's how do we think about different ways to live, teaming up with other people for a time till our money is more, looking at different types of land use typologies, certainly pushing, we just signed on to be a sponsor, I'm scared, of a corporate tax that will be charged to big corporate investors who try to buy in our neighborhoods. And we've got, a legislator who wants to carry that forward. It'll probably take a year to get the bill to the right place and then voted on. But this kind of reform is important right now. And all of it needs a race and equity lens because it's been a problem. We have to address that. And so I think there's everything from property to people and being willing to join in the conversation and stay there. Even if you're not buying today, it matters because speaking up matters. Someone else, I think it was Tia, wrote, we have to hold our elected officials accountable. Are the Black electeds pushing homeownership as their major thrust? No, they are not. Yell at them. And so, the narrative has to change, Mitchella. We're not going to see any of the changes we think we're seeking.
I wanted to say one thing and expand on what Lori said about going the multifamily route. Just to put into perspective for you guys, I know someone who was approved for $500,000. She went the multifamily route and got approved for $1 million. This is in Oakland, very expensive real estate in the Bay Area. She moved from Berkeley paying $2,000 for an apartment, got her a duplex, rented out the other side. Her mortgage was $2,600. Her rental income is $2,500. She's paying $100 a month to live in Oakland. So I need you guys to understand the importance of strategy. A lot of people, they don't teach you strategy. They teach you get a home, just get a home, but it's more to that. Utilize these programs that are available. Utilize down payment assistance because that's what these people are doing to start building their wealth. So just to put that into perspective, you guys should really look into the multifamily route. If you have a brother, a cousin, a family member who's willing to go in with you, rent out one side, get a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom duplex, have somebody else pay your mortgage and use your money to invest into other things.
Yeah, Ashley, I saw you say that and Lori did a little dance. So I'm also a multi-family owner, property owner myself. So I completely agree with everything that you're saying. Roy, I know your hand has been raised for a while. So did you want to ask your question now?
Hi, guys. I'm Larry. I'm Roy's partner, but we're here tonight. Thank you guys for putting this on. This is really informative. I'm really learning a lot. And I'm here because I want to be an advocate on the side of things in the real estate industry. I'm literally just finishing up my classes and courses and waiting for my date to take the test. And so this kind of stuff is very helpful. And so I'm phoning in from Bottle Hills. Hey, Lori, we neighbors. And I'm glad to be here. And my question is, because I want to go in full throttle, with the community on my back and by my side, what should I look into? What are some things that I could really dive into to make sure I'm getting their education and then, our education?
So just to summarize the question again, Roy, you're asking, so given your background and going into this field of real estate, you're trying to figure out what you can do to make sure that you're educating your community while at the same time educating people who are not in the Black community on Black homeownership. Was that the question?
No, more so, how can I be of service? You know what I mean? What are some things that I could do that I can, and because I'm the student, I'm a student of the craft right now, and I want to make sure I'm getting everything, what the textbook says. They're going to tell you one thing, and then there's the reality of what's really going on out here. And I want to know if there are things that I can tap into, like learning about this CalHFA thing from Ashley tonight is mind opening. And hearing about these numbers going in, they're not going to tell us these numbers. You have to seek them out. So I want to know, is there other things that I can look into? Like I'm picking up these gems tonight, and I want to take it to the bank and really, really do something in this community that I'm now a member of.
That's great. Well, I saw Dolores Golden in the chat. She's an encyclopedia and an expert beyond words. And so joining with the local realty board matters. And Dolores was talking about the Southwest Board of Realtors. Some of these old school Black and brown real estate associations, the boards that have been around a long time, you want to join in and get expert advice. People used to always say, practice makes perfect. No, perfect practice makes perfect. So you want to get the right answer, get around the right people, breathe in mentorship where you can. I don't prefer the word, but I'm training people all the time, and there's 50 of me, right? And so align with people who are getting work done, not just talking about it. Too much talking, not enough doing. Look at the work they're getting done and get in there and ask how you can be of service. You can help teach classes for people who are taking financial education classes. There are thousands of people online now. And so a number of us are inviting people in, to join with us and help teach more and more, because I'm not going to double the size of my organization because more people want class. So you've got these points of entry. I would encourage you about that. And then decide who you want to be. Start out with that. If you want to be a realtor who just takes a little extra because you can, that's how brown on brown crime started and kept going. Black on black crime. It's a mess. Some of the least trusted advisors during the last crisis were realtors of color. Now that's a shame. Then there were the people who were phenomenal. And so let's lead with that, right? With excellence. And push yourself to be excellent and no more, like Ashley was talking about. Don't be one of the dumb realtors. That's just useless. But you can be smart. You can be excellent. You can be a person who's willing to always be a student. I will tell you, after 30 years of leading the same organization, I learn every day or I'm quitting. You got to be willing to learn and to keep expanding your knowledge base and to partner and walk alongside other people, even if you won't make money.
Thank you. That's golden. Thank you, guys. This is great.
Thank you.
Yes, so we're almost at time. I think it's 7:58, so we have time for one more question. And then if you're available to stay over a little bit, I'm here to moderate questions and make sure that people who still have questions can get answered. But for the last question, this one is a little bit more technical. This is from Maury. Is it recommended to refinance with cash out now to buy another property? Is that recommended? I'm not sure.
Run your numbers. Go ahead, Ashley. Tell her.
Honestly, it depends. You need to talk to a lender about that. We can't really advise you. That's real specific. So I would advise you to talk to 3 lenders and have them run down each scenario. Which one's best for me? Never just go with one.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Love it.
So then we actually have room for another question. Justin, I see that you had your hand up for a bit.
Yeah, so first I just want to say thank you to Michael, Ashley, Lori, and Mitchella. I don't know if I'm saying your name wrong. I apologize. So my parents are homeowners. I'm self-employed. I've been renting for the past 2 years. And Lori, I felt like you were talking to me because I'm paying like 3 G's a month right now in downtown LA. So my main thing is I've like filled out the mortgage lender like calculators. I'm a real estate agent too. I just sold my first house a couple months ago. But it's saying that I only qualify for like mid 100s, but I make around probably 13,000 a month. So, and my depth is only like 4,500 a month. So it's so like extremely frustrating, like mentally, it makes me think like, man, I'm never going to own a house when I feel like I'm doing everything right. You know what I'm saying? So like my main thing is I'm just trying to get past that. Like, oh, I can do it. You know what I'm saying? So advice, I get emotional because like I'm paying rent like 3 G's a month, and that can be going towards like a mortgage. You know what I'm saying? So any advice, next steps and stuff like that.
I think you need to get a real good pre-qualification, because self-employment, it can get tricky. And you might want to call one of the housing counseling agencies, go on our website, talk to a counselor, because you got to get the numbers right and get your mind right around whatever the numbers really are. And sometimes people are pre-qualifying the product, and you don't want to do that. You want to get a broad pre-qual that tells you about your situation, you know, so that you're clear. And then look at what adaptations you need to make to be able to participate if you have that kind of income per month.
Yeah, definitely talk to a mortgage counselor. They could give you really good advice on what to do and how to get your finances in order to, again, utilize programs, offset those costs. Even though you make that much money, offset those costs.
And thank you, Justin, for sharing your story. Just based on some of the comments that I've been getting here privately, people echo your sentiments, you know, like you sharing that story helps bring exposure and light to these challenges that young millennials and people like us are facing. So thank you for that. You guys got a lot of questions. People just keep sending you questions and questions and questions. So all the time that you have, I'm excited to stay with you. I think another question this one makes me really sad. So I'm not sure if this is really a question, but I would love to hear your response to it. And people, I know everyone, it's 8 o'clock. So if you have to drop, feel free to drop at this time. I completely understand, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Please share any workarounds to reduce discrimination in the home buying process, like not providing a photo, using a white friend to pretend to own the home during an appraisal, etc. Yeah, my head blew back a little bit too. So curious to hear what your response is to that.
I tend to not want to be in the avoidance business, as you can imagine, as an advocate. But the truth is we need to expose inequity, right? And we need to expose racial injustice. So document it, but also for participating. I think the big deal is Dolores put in the chat some of the African-American real estate professionals, some of the Black realtors. You want to work with people who look like you. If you're a Latino, then okay. But figure out how to navigate with them, because they're already in the mix and you don't know anything about it. So there's all kinds of scoops and ways that they play a tough game that they can be helpful. But like Ashley said earlier, you want to get a good realtor now. Don't spend your time working with people who aren't educated. But I would always encourage us to stand up for any, discrimination we see. And the tips piece to work around it, in the ultimate long run, it may help you, but not everyone else. And so it's how do we deal with that? And if there are things you're seeing, groups like ours, we stay in trouble because we advocate for the truth and we don't mind exposing. So we track banks, for example. How does a certain bank that's worth, $50 billion make 3 loans to Black people in all of 2019 in Metro Los Angeles? These are the things we talk about. And so you can help with that by speaking truth. Now, you want to finish your own personal situation. I gave you some tips. Get some people who navigate this all the time. But I think that in the end, you get ahead for a minute, but not for a mile.
Truer words. Great point, Lori. I also want to give a shout out for people who are still on the call for tomorrow's panel discussion. It's Wednesday from 7 to 8 p.m. PST, and that's for people who are interested in learning about alternative ways to invest in real estate that don't necessarily require a large down payment or even getting your hands dirty. So now that I've made my, I feel like I have talking tracks that I need to hit, like all my bullet points. Jordy, you've also had your hand up for a little bit.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mitch, and thank you guys for being here today. I really appreciate that. So I had a question about kind of some maybe informal resources that you guys take advantage of at more like, you know, the casual daily trying to stay up on expertise type level. You guys have mentioned a lot of great kind of formal resources that we can use to learn more. But when it comes to just like exposing yourself to strategy and making sure that you stay sharp with all of these kind of perspectives, are there any like experts that you rely on, people that you follow, resources that you like to tap into regularly?
Ashley, you're making a face.
Well, no, because I'm thinking are you talking like podcasts? Like, is there like,
Sure, yeah, anything that you want to share that I think it's really important to kind of like normalize information and even like when it comes to routine, if there are people that you know you can kind of turn to stay sharp, that's kind of, and yeah, podcasts, websites, books, whatever.
There's tons of resources like that. To stay up on top of things, if you're like an audio, but read or listen to the Race for Profit. That'll break down a lot of the housing policies and practices that are going on. It'll tell the story of people from the beginning with contract buying and how they were treated. So that's a way to understand more of like kind of where we are now with policies and all that. Of course, Color of Law will break things down for you with redlining and practice, predatory lending practices. If you're talking like real estate, you want to know invest in and not Earn Your Leisure podcast. Like there's so many out there. I could go on and on. You could Google housing resources like books and they'll come up with some good ones. But I will say Race for Profit has been one of my favorites.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Got it. And Dolores, I've heard great things about you. Your name speaks for itself. So if you would like to come off mute.
I just want to say that in Los Angeles and the whole California area, because we have formed a California Black Real Estate Professionals group, and I see Tangi on the phone, one of our members, and Norman, we're all over California. Wherever you need to be, call a Black real estate person. We're here to help you. We've been through hell. Me and Lori have fight so many battles, I can't tell you. We've been testifying with Congresswoman Waters against Black people's trying to get a house and can't, with the crazy discrimination that's going on. I mean, you all have just tipped the iceberg. You have no idea what the hell we have been through and still going through. So reach out to us. We're here. You want to buy a house, you getting into real estate, you need to know what sharks are in the water. And we're here to tell me, holla.
I think that was also a mic drop, Dolores. I think that was great. I think that was great commentary. I learned from that. Okay. I think, and then Michael, I think at this question, you might get excited by this one. Given that the government from the city level to the federal historical have contributed, if not stand by idly by allowing redlining and covenants that prevented Black home ownership, would you advocate for a major home ownership program similar to the GI Bill?
Yes. I mean, I wouldn't have a tremendous hesitation about that. We know how to craft good policy, I think, in this area, in housing generally. There's reason to be a little bit concerned about, like, having the same or similar government, trying to offer up and produce the solution for problems that it helped cause in the first place. But that's there. So many of our, particularly racially oriented problems, you would be able to say that about, right? Like, this is the government we have, and we can figure out some good policy to send its way. And I wouldn't be too shook about the fact that we've screwed it up in the past, and that's what we're trying to get better at.
Got it. And the last question that I think I see is Norman. I think you have your hand raised.
Yes, this is Norman Alexander. Just had a quick question. If the panelists could address, we know about the discriminatory stuff in the banks. And I think a good point that Lori brought was that some banks just aren't lending. Why is it such a small number? I know something in Chicago, similar type situation. But my question also is the education of people just understanding, particularly Lori and your people not even thinking about buying a house that can buy a house. What do those numbers look like? And how do we, or what programs do you have to reach out to folks just understanding the importance of it? As I always say, everyone's buying a house. You're either buying it for yourself or for your landlord. So what programs do you have like that, or have you done anything that we could possibly support you with?
Thank you. I'd say, Norman, our slogan used to be "Kiss your landlord goodbye." Then someone told me it was too aggressive, so we started saying "Tell your landlord goodbye." Okay, don't have a landlord. And so be the landlord. I think that it would be pretty straightforward to run numbers on where Black people are tending to live, and take the pulse survey that Dr. Ong and his team at the Center for Neighborhood Knowledge use, and then overlay that with income data and see if we've got a number of Black people, right, who are living in our geography that may not be renting or maybe renting versus owning. I don't want to give you anecdotal commentary. I think our experience is when we put out a welcome mat for young Black people, they responded. When we told them they could achieve, and we were intentional. I'm talking about things I live now, right? I'm not interested in talking about anything we haven't really worked on. And the truth is, we had to say to people, it's okay to join. And so our outreach has continued to adapt. And we went after people who weren't owners. I mentioned like the young Black engineers and some of the other groupings. This group tonight, if a third of the people on the call are students who never thought about it till Black History Month offered the opportunity by information, we've achieved something, right? But we could run that number backwards, I guess, to really get to some additional information. But it's the same old things that have been true in our communities for a long time. Churches, schools, frats, sorors, right? Places that we congregate and communicate are where we found we're always finding people who don't participate. My mother-in-law bought her first home and only home at 72 years old. Hadn't been focused on it. Now, she wore down my housing counselor, let me please say. But now she's been a homeowner. She's 97 now. So it's possible. She just hadn't focused on it. She'd just always been a renter, and she was focusing on working and raising her family kind of thing. So I think that young or old, it's getting that messaging out that people can achieve. And then each of us, each one tell one. Word of mouth is still our leading form of advertising, Norman. 34% of the time, I think. I'm probably quoting the wrong number with my marketing guy. But, it's high. And so our community likes to talk to each other. We like to be on social media, it seems. Let's get in those places. And if we need to really run data about who's not paying attention, I think we could. It's just been my experience that we're reaching a bunch of people, and the more intentional we are, people want to be reached. The staff team has made it clear to me that NHS and groups like us, and there are many of us across the country, have resources. And as we team up with CalHFA and other groups like that, there's a lot of people talking about what to do, but they don't necessarily have the resources to do it. So that's another piece. Like Dolores said, holla, right? And we've got to get in there and say these resources are really available. And you pay the same tax dollars as everyone else. How is that money being used to leverage and advance your family wealth?
Speaking of hollering at Dolores, any good resources to search for vetted realtors or agents? And Dolores, if you want to respond to that, I'm happy to give you the floor.
What was that question again?
Any good resources to search for vetted realtors or agents?
Yeah, well, they should go to the Southwest Los Angeles Association of Realtors website. They should go to Consolidated Realty website. They're right there. Southwest is on La Tejera. Consolidated is on Don Felipe. They're all right here in your community. Inglewood borders on Manchester, right by the Forum. We're all around you. If you holla, you'll see us. If you go down Crenshaw, Western, Slauson, you see all these Black-owned real estate companies that y'all pass by on your way to Playa Vista and Beverly Hills. Why? We the people you need to talk to. We the people that live and work in the community. Lori laughing at me. Her and I get excited about this, but we're right here. We haven't gone anywhere. We've been here. One of the pioneers, Deloitte Edwards, started in real estate 50 years ago, when Black people were not in existence. You couldn't sell or buy a house. So people have been here. You all need to wake up and see who's here and come see about your history.
Thank you, Dolores. I appreciate
Anytime.
Yes. You got to thank you in the chat as well. Okay, so I think I went through just about all of the questions that I had. So just turning it back to, sorry, I am trying to get good at PowerPoint. Excuse me for my Zoom bomb, I guess, but I'll stop sharing. So turning it back to the panelists, before we drop, and I know that there was a lot of information shared today, so we'll be following up with the email with the recording and everything, so that way people will have this information. But before we drop, Lori, Ashley, or Michael, is there anything else that you wanted to share or any other closing remarks?
Walk with the people that walk with you. Work with the people who will work with you. Don't go seek outside of your community because they don't understand how your dynamics work. They won't understand the struggles that you have. You need to walk with somebody who's been down that path. And I want you guys to know that's very, very important because it'll make the whole process so much easier.
I'll go. I was trying to see if Michael was going. Thank you, Ashley. It's so well said. And I think watch for Legacy Talks. We're kicking off this month. Go on our websites, Ashley and Tia and the team at CalHFA have a great website that they're putting Black stories of achievement and success. You want to fill your mind with that. And don't spend your time in the negative or looking down. There's nothing down there for you. But I think we are encouraging you to work within the Black community. And sometimes we give up on ourselves, but we don't need to. We can stay the course. And there's lots of success, lots of achievement. All of us are trying to be helpful. And nobody's saying they're perfect at anything, but we can certainly give it a good stab. And I think get on the path to homeownership. It's a path, it's a journey, and sometimes it's tough days. I never thought I'd be in the same house for 25 years, but here I am. And now I'm doing what some other people asked, where I'm thinking about what money I have set aside to be able to gobble something up, because foreclosures are coming, y'all. And so are you prepared? Maybe 6 to 12 months before they start hitting seriously, but that doesn't matter. You know, take your time and get in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I would just, reiterate to take, take advantage of the resources that people have been throwing in the chat so helpfully. Take advantage of Lori, Ashley, and the colleagues such as Dolores that are out there putting in the work. And I just want to apologize that I didn't get my virtual background game, where y'all are at. I got this red wall, y'all look so good.
Mine's backwards. No, it's good.
No, yours is right.
I was like, oh, what's going on here? I don't want to mess that up.
No, you all look fantastic. I feel like we all match. And Michael, you're with us here in spirit. And you did a great job. We're very informative. So I couldn't ask for anything more from you. I also want to point people out to a couple people in the chat mentioned that they were licensed loans officers who'd be available to help anyone get pre-qualification. So I know Michael Mosby mentioned this, and he left his phone number as well as his email address. And then someone else mentioned that they were also able to help. I don't know, guys, this is a popping group chat. I feel like there's 9 million things to be said. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this. Yeah. And just thank you so much, everybody, for attending. I hope that you got a lot of good information out of this and some laughs. And just, again, thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mitchella. You're amazing.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks to each of the panelists as well. Thank you.